Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of God Built This podcast. I'm your host, Maxine, and we're on episode 89. Today, I'm joined with a friend of the show, friend in real life. Alicia is back in the house. Welcome back.
Hey guys.
So happy to have you. We have a lot to discuss. Recently we were all notified that Joe Biden has picked Kamala Harris to be his VP pick. And I just want to start off by saying, I'm conflicted. And I think it's because there's a lot of conflicting messaging around her and her history with being a prosecutor. And what does that mean for Black folks? What does that mean for mass incarceration and ending, a lot of people, and I describe mass incarceration as a new form of slavery, but what does that mean for that? What has she done? Is she really the progressive senator that people are saying that she is? What's to believe? Because I recently, I messaged you this meme that I've been seeing on Instagram of Oscar Grant, who's an unarmed Black man who was killed. The movie Fruitvale Station was based off of him. And according to this meme, this is crazy that we're in 2020, that we're looking at memes for info and news, but sometimes we do. And according to this meme, during this time, Kamala Harris did not do anything about this killing, and she didn't speak about it, and she was the actual prosecutor at the time. But then I found later information that wasn't true, and she wasn't the prosecutor in California. It is just crazy. Like, what the fuck? What is true? What is not? Then it's like, wow, this is beautiful to see a Black woman, but she's more of she has all of the encompassing traits of a woman of color, right? She's a Jamaican, she's Indian, and it's a representative up there, someone who's close to being president, someone who probably will be the president because Joe Biden's a corpse. And I just feel like this is a proud moment, yes, optic wise, right? It's beautiful in appearance. It's great to see. I could tell my niece and she could be inspired. She could see this and be inspired as a Black woman there. And yes, that's beautiful. I don't want to take that away from this moment, but I do want us to be able to have conversations around what does this really mean for all of us as Americans, particularly for Black folks in particular. So I just want to know, where do you stand? Are you conflicted? Were you just automatically, okay, I knew it, I'm fine with it?
Here's where I'm at. And I've had to check myself. We are on the outside looking in, and we have a certain notion of what we think people's jobs are and their job duties and who does what. There's no one in politics as a job that people love. It don't matter who it is, Bernie Sanders or whatever, that have not have a policy that to you or me on the face of it would be like, what the fuck is that? Right? I just recently learned that, I was big about Joe Biden because I was like the crime bill, the 3 strikes that decimated Black community. I'm not fucking with you on principle. But then I recently realized how bad the crack era was back in the 80s, and all these Black people talking about their experiences and how much the Black leadership wanted that bill. And in the original bill, there were a lot more programs that were supposed to be rehabilitative, but the Senate gutted it. Right? So, which is what happens with bills. What's proposed never. They have to make those compromises. Now, I'm always mad at the Democratic Party because I do think they're weak as fuck. I don't think they're using their power like they're supposed to. I think people are very status quo, but they are not. Even if some of them are racist, they at least have the common sense not to be racist out loud, right? Like you can't say that from the time Black people's allegiance party switched, right? The Republican Party is just very, very racist. Black people are, what was somebody said? They are they are, oh, what did they say? Oh, damn, I'm gonna come to me. They were like, Black people are very conservative. They would be Republicans in a heartbeat if Republicans weren't racist. So here's where I'm at. We got 2 tickets. 2. We passed the game. Those conversations people are having, and the only reason I'm annoyed they're having it now, because it does what you're saying, is where your frustration is, where it's like, it's so much information that you're confused about it. And believe it or not, there's people who can have those conversations and still know to vote. And there's people who get very disillusioned and just confused and they quit and give up. So you have to really understand that sometimes the conversation does not need to be had in a very public space like that, because people are literally looking like, well, I'm gonna vote for who she votes for. It seems absurd because we're the Black young professionals and we think we critically think for ourselves, and we can have intellectual conversations and disagree, but that's not the majority of people, the majority of America. And so what it's doing is it's just causing this cloud of doubt. And that's exactly what happened with Hillary. Like, she was a better candidate than Donald Trump. Period. He should have never even been close. That woman has done some things. I'll never forgive her for calling that Black boy a predator.
Yeah.
But on the other side, she's done broken glass ceilings, right? Now, I don't necessarily feel it's for me, because Black women often don't. We still have ceilings under the glass ceiling for white people, right? But we're gonna talk about the power she's had, the position she's had. And Kamala, people are taking like her one job and dismissing all the work she did to climb up that. Politics is a dirty power game. Period. It doesn't matter what country you in, what state. You have to start with that mindset, Max, because we have to be able to situate our idealism and our strategies for revolution and for toppling things. Because if you notice, the only way true progressive, like the widespread progressive, is if a regime is toppled. Not if somebody else get a new job in that system. They have to be toppled. And folks not really ready to topple it. Because if they were, they would have fought for who they felt like, which it should have been, in my opinion, Elizabeth Warren should be goddamn, right?
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
Period. She said a little whatever she said, Native American. I don't have her DNA results, okay? So whatever. But out of everybody, just intelligence, plans, everybody talking about, oh, what's his plan? She had it laid out for you. She was even doing some of the media stuff to get the youth of it. She hit every mark. Y'all, people, she got the lowest amount of support, almost, especially for someone her stature. Bernie Sanders, people didn't show up like they want to show up. You didn't show up. Period. All this talking, that is, you have parts in the race where you do certain things because you're trying to discuss those topics and get that person on the ticket. But they didn't do that then. They called her a cop because she was prosecutor. Okay, that is the top cop. That's fine. But she did what a prosecutor does. What did you want her to do? You know what I'm saying?
It's like we're trying to live in this utopian society that, well, let's not glorify cops. Let's not have cops. And I think ideally, yes, we talked about this before in the previous episode, how we would like to live in an area, in a world where we may not need cops, right? But I think that's unrealistic. Where there's good, there's evil. I feel like we have to understand that there needs to be some form of law and order. And I feel like when we say that, even as Blacks, it's like, oh, Trumper? Like, what do you mean law and order? That's what Trump said. And that's not fair.
It's just not realistic in politics. Nonprofits, there's so many other avenues people could really be putting that energy that could be bartering for those resources to do said thing. But presidential races are not it. They have never been it. I get mad when people talk about Obama and they're like, he's a war criminal. I was like, yes, he is. Just like every other president. Yeah. What did you expect him to be? Yeah. What did you expect him to be? Especially with the amount of, and you saw it, that's not even a speculation. You saw the amount of pushback and challenge. You can't even fight for a raise that you've been wanting, a promotion you've been wanting at work that you don't work your ass off because there's a key white person that don't like you. But you expected Obama to overcome all of that. That's why you have to put people in the active position, because he has more power than you, but his enemies also have more power than your enemies. You have to really understand that dynamic. These people blocked every single thing he did. He couldn't even get his Supreme Court nomination through. Did the whole little thing with the little guy, couldn't get it through. What's not clicking? You see what's happening, and there's probably more happening in the background. He did war criminals. He fought the war. He surely did. No one's saying that, right? I'm acknowledging that it happened. I'm also acknowledging that you should not have expected him to be a black savior. You should not have expected his administration to go in and clean up all the horrible policies that are keeping black people down. That's unfair to him. And then also, what did you do on the outside? Because it's supposed to be everybody's supposed to be working.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do on the outside to help him? What if he did do all of that, Maxine? Once he put those laws in place, y'all gotta be able the local government that y'all really need to be talking about and having conversations about, you don't ever have because it's not exciting and you don't trend on it.
And
right?
knowing who is in the local government, like knowing the names.
Ones. President Obama can pass whatever law, and guess what? They still got the authority not to follow that shit. So he could have done that, and guess what? You still have people because you didn't pay attention or you just didn't care, or nobody else was talking about it, right? Whatever the reason was, or you did and you were screaming into the void. Whatever the reason was, there's more corrupt local politicians than the president. I promise you. He is. If you read, everybody learned about the Constitution. The president is a figurehead. You shouldn't even. He has his office. There's a reason why it's supposed to, right? Donald Trump has definitely gone outside the boundaries of power and what he's supposed to be able to do. But it's very like he gets him some executive orders. He can do some little pardons, but he got to work with everybody. He's supposed to be the mediator. He's supposed to be the CEO. Why weren't y'all focused on the Senate and the House races? And some people are. That's why Omar and all those other the new school Democrats got reelected when everybody thought they would.
AOC,
because there are people doing the job. I'm not saying they're not. I'm saying the people that's hollering about Kamala, and I'm at the end of it, right, to really kind of answer your question, I don't give a fuck about what she did. Not because it doesn't matter. One, because it already happened, and two, because what is your third choice? You're not going to be a fake so you're going to be a fake revolutionary, and the only revolutionary thing you're doing is withholding your vote. What are you out here helping to dismantle voter suppression efforts? Call out redlining. I know there's cause and effect. We want to be real, and I'm charging myself too. I'm not just talking out to people. I have to charge my own because I understand. I'm a very passionate person. I understand it. I've lived in poverty. Those I'm not 2 paychecks back, right? I completely get it. But some people, black people have this bad. Well, they'll just holler about shit. They ain't got nothing. And it's not just black people. White people do it too. But I'm black, so I'm talking about these.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, like just hollering about stuff just because they just want to talk. They just want to have a conversation. And talking about good stuff, people never hit since talking about bad stuff. So here's my thing. You're talking about all these things she's done. You're not talking about what the point of it is because you don't got a choice. You did not do what you were supposed to. Either you did do what you were supposed to do when you fought for your candidate and they lost. Okay, well then stop being a sore loser because we're all a part of it. We all had our part to get our people in the race. Did we not? It was only going to be one winner. Right?
There's this hopelessness though that is so thick. I'm seeing right, but and as much as we are like that should be the only choice, right? But I'm seeing so many people on my timeline on Twitter just talking about, well, I'm just not gonna vote because they see it as these are two figures. We have Biden, we have Trump, they equalize them. They don't see them as
foolish.
much of, but they see it like, well, who's lesser evil, right? And Biden is lesser evil in their perspective, but it still doesn't mean much in their eyes. And I like that feeling is real. So like, how do you I don't know how to speak to that because I get it because it was just right before a couple of months ago, Biden was charged with the sexual misconduct act, with the whole crime. But there's so many things that could be put up against him that will make people so turned off by him, by these key buzzwords, right? And it sucks that we are given these two choices, but a lot of people are just feeling so hopeless that I don't know what else. I don't know how to motivate you.
I don't know. That's selfishness. Let me be clear. I'm hopeless. I do not like I don't really dislike Kamala as much as everybody else, but I also haven't really dug into her record. I'm sure there's going to be some. She was a prosecutor. I'm sure she locked up some niggas. Let's talk about what we really do. Talk. Some of them niggas need to be locked up. That's another conversation.
That's just right now, okay?
And I can say
and
that
during the crime bill.
I can say that and still also acknowledge that they were in environments that they didn't have no other choice. You understand what I'm talking about? It's called duality. We are playing a game. Your hopelessness don't win no games. You are not gonna be. We can't be more hopeless than the niggas who fought for our right to vote. Just in 1965, we just got it. It is a very. I'm sorry. Let me. I'm yelling, girl, because I be mad. It's real. A very entitled stance for you, Maxine. It don't matter what's going on. Our situation is not as dire as it was back then. People on Peter's Bridge got beaten, got back up to right their right to vote.
John Lewis just recently passed.
How many people gonna get beat and keep going back out there? I applaud the people that's going out there looting and marching and stuff like that too, because I haven't been done all that type of stuff. I'm going to the Million Man March in a few weeks in DC, but that like I haven't. I'm not supposed to be out there getting beat. I don't think that's gonna be helpful for me and my family, right? But I can understand people who do, and I can support that, and I can also not be a hypocrite about, oh, we're so hopeless. A lot of these people that's talking like that are not the poor people that these policies are really going to affect. People are talking from a place, even if it's just our little fake young Black professional nouveau
fear
corridor of we think we're safe because we can buy a Gucci belt. That's where our corridor is. We have this special little niche where we think we can't be touched because we're in this alternate reality of social media. And it's not ever those people who the bills really, and that's why Joe Biden won. You know who voted for Joe Biden? Them niggas, those old people and the other Black people who are the one who are very poor. Those are the people that these policies are really going to affect. There is you cannot sit here in my face and tell me there is not a difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. You can't. I'm not talking about the sexual assault because I'm not talking about the personal. I'm talking about how their power is impacting America, and how if Donald Trump wins, they've already let him slide with so much very destructive things that Black people have fought for. Forget all everybody else. We fought for the core of the civil rights movement, the core of these progressive movements and policies on the back of Black people. So what he's dismantling is us. Even though I feel a lot of Black people are looking at, oh, he's speaking to the immigrants, he's speaking to the Latinos. They don't feel like he's coming for them, and that's a false sense of security, and it's stupid as hell. Because why would you not? We're always the ones targeted. Why would you think just because you got $100,000 job, you're no longer, our community's no longer just as vulnerable? Why don't you think as soon as he gets them out the way, who you think he coming from? At the end of the day, it's not a choice, not because none of those things matter. It's because we're in the part of the game where it's not matters, if that makes sense. It's not that they don't matter. It's not that we can't discuss them. It's not none of that. I will never hold nobody's feelings about any of it. It's just that in this part of the game is where we are. This is where we gotta play. That's just what it is, right? And then take that energy, take that newfound skill of research, take that newfound group of people that you made a bond with and said, I want to be more civically engaged. I want to start looking at election posters and move forward with that. But when you are in a position where you have one of the most destructive presidents and I say that because not saying that no one was even close, because the presidency, right? A lot of it was shielded. They were doing the same things, you just didn't see. And there is something to say that Donald Trump is just doing what you're saying, the quiet part out loud, right? But at the same time, he's still doing it. You can't just allow him to continue. He needed to be gone. He's a criminal. He's literally used this like there's so many crimes, and I still to this day I'm annoyed that we're the ones that this burden is falling on to get him out of here, because y'all couldn't get it through the Senate, right? Like y'all that's who you need to be mad at. We don't need to be talking about Kamala. And because my point is talk about her for what? If you want to talk about her because you're really just learning about her and y'all want to discuss some shit she did, I'm fine with that. But people are talking crazy. They're talking like, oh, well, we're not gonna vote. Oh, like what you said. Well, I mean, we don't like either one of them, and both of the parties suck. How dare you How dare you say that? When you think that when we fought for our right to vote, anybody that was on those tickets was really for Black people? You think that they voted for people that that cared about them, that did they were
They did the best they could. They
were
just
right
what they
then. The
had.
voting rights act for the first year. The first year people were legally allowed to vote, and they still were getting beat. You can't sit here and not and trash the power and the sacrifice that really is one of the biggest only powers that Black people have. When we got the right to vote, there were a lot of things that started shifting our way, even if they just did it to get our vote. Voting rights and voting power, we cannot afford to lose that. And when you're talking about this person who's stacking up the judiciary with all these conservative judges, these are lifetime appointments. That's what I'm really concerned about. If you're talking about, right? I'm not even concerned about all the other stuff. You got to start where did we as Black people see the most improvement? We saw them with the Roe versus Wade as women. We saw them with the Brown versus Board of Education. We saw that in federal Supreme Court. That's where we saw a lot of breakthroughs. He's toppling that. I don't see why it's not clicking to folks.
People aren't doing their own individual history and they're basing it off of memes. So it's like she really isn't about Black people. Don't vote for her because she's Black. And it's
okay.
like,
so hold on. Kamala ain't about Black people. Was anybody else up there really about Black people, right? If you really want to talk about it, I think Elizabeth Warren might have, but she was Republican before. So what? She need to be Bernie Sanders. You look at Bernie Sanders and they been peeling his cap back. Y'all got that one picture of Bernie getting locked up, but Bernie was a career politician getting on any bill he wanted to. He signed that crime bill right up there with Bill. He sure did. He signed a whole bunch of bills. You don't hear that? That's how dare they talk about symbolism? Because Bernie was symbolic.
He was, and I was a Bernie bro.
He didn't
Bernie sis.
You look at his record. What did he do? He still made horrible decisions. He was still on the wrong side of policy. I don't hear nobody crying about, oh, it's just a symbolic. It's just a symbolic. That's code for, we're only voting for her
because she's Black. Yeah.
Okay. Well, to be honest, y'all use Black women to people are literally out here talking. We're talking about white males too. That blows me. Black women is gonna save the United States. Well, you got one right there. Y'all say it every day. We're gonna save us. She's trying to do that. What's the point? That's my point on it. It doesn't matter because this is where we at, and you gotta write that shit in your diary, G. Write it in your diary because
talk it to your close friends and don't say anything much about it outside of that because we gotta get this job done.
Because it's very harmful. Because people are very. Yeah. I hate to be like that because it'd be one thing. I wouldn't say a word if folks was like, you know what, they just suck. She's not who I wanted, but I understand what we need to do, and then I'm gonna do my part. Niggas not doing a part. I can't stand that. You're not doing your part with nothing. All you do is vote. That's your one part you do. You don't do nothing else for none of the years. But you have
the least you could do is vote.
You have a right to sit here and try to judge someone else who's done everything to even get in this position. How dare you? I can't do it. We can't be hypocrites about that. We can't. We can't. Moral of the story is go vote. Period. Go vote because if nobody else, it's not about Kamala. Damn, now I'm messing up her name. Kamala. It's not about Kamala. It's not. It's not about Kamala.
Right.
You need to find a reason to vote. Right? Find your reason because there is a reason. And people, that's why I say there is a difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. There is a reason. Look at something he's doing. Right? And is Joe Biden going to do that? Joe Biden is not going to be stacking up the judiciary with staunch Republican conservatives, not just Republicans, staunch conservatives. They're going to be breaking down all those right bills you got, knocking them down. Or the bill is going to be there, but everything inside the bill is going to be hollowed out. They just rolled back a transgender right bill.
Oh, I missed that. Did they?
Obama didn't do nothing though.
Yeah. Moral of the story is go vote. Do your own research, but definitely don't just sit back because you're hopeless. There's a lot to consider here. It's a bigger picture, and we have to respect the works of all of our ancestors who died literally.
that might not be enough for people, and people are not gonna be like me. That's enough for me. There truly is enough for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did what I think I could do when I tried to big up Elizabeth Warren. I fought for who I wanted to fight for, and it didn't work out. And guess what? You just got to keep moving on it, because unless you're really trying to be revolutionary, you're not revolutionary by withholding your vote. You're actually not even withholding your vote. You're just allowing the other person to get for it to be even playing field, right? Like he's gonna seem to have more votes just because this person didn't get any votes. You're not withholding it, right? Do it with your chest. Like stop trying to rationalize and reframe things. See, words means that you're not voting. You are voting.
You are, yeah.
You're
Indirectly,
you're giving the other side an advantage. Period. So you need to be able to really say what it is. Don't be like, I'm withholding my vote. Say, I'm okay with Donald Trump winning. That's what you really need to say, because that's what you're doing. But I bet you they won't.
They don't want to say it with their chest. That's why
they won't do it, because they know it's wrong. So they make up this other story about what they're doing.
So speaking of saying it with your chest, Akon recently said that Black Americans should pretty much just get over slavery, and that we are essentially doing ourselves a disservice. Black Americans are doing themselves a disservice when they continuously bring up slavery and explain it to be the reason why they are where they are in life, if they are underprivileged. I want to just play the first 18 seconds of this clip when he is speaking with Vlad. And you guys can find it on YouTube. It's accessible there. But I'm curious.
Any interview with Vlad is already some bullshit. Let's be real.
Yeah, right. And there's that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's entertaining, right? But let's take a listen and see. Can you see it from your end?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, cool. Share screen. Okay, cool. So let's just.
I think it's also the art of just letting the past go and moving towards the future. And I think in the U.S., they have this stigma of just not letting go of the past and blaming the past on every mishap or disappointment. And I think as long as you hold on to that past, it's just a lot of weight that you carry with you everywhere you go. And it's hard to move forward and move fast when you got weight on your back.
Okay. So here's the thing with that. I feel like there's this privilege that he may be speaking from, being that he is from Senegal and he's from the homeland. He wasn't directly snatched from his homeland. He could trace back his ancestors. He could trace back his family history, and he has the same name as when his parents named him. Same for his parents and his grandparents, etc. So he's not removed from his history. And there's this, they can move on. Like they went through their own trauma there as well, but they could move on in a land that is majority them, people who look like them. They're not a minority, so they don't experience what racism is in America in Senegal. So there's that privilege there when he's coming from, looking into America from those eyes. But I wonder if there's something that we could pull from what he's saying, just from the sense of, and I get it, like that's horrible to say. Why would you say get over slavery? It is the founding point of redlining, segregation, discrimination, like so many things that are still affecting mass incarceration. I get all of that. But there's something when he's saying, when you continue to hold on to something that's dead weight, essentially, that is still a burden to you, how much is it serving you? How much is it an advantage point for you? Like, how someone did you wrong, you could have been cheated on, you could have been abused. If you are still holding to that pain, to that bitterness, it eats up on you. So when you get into that new relationship, you're lashing out on your new partner. You're not your best self because you're still holding on to that bitterness and pain. So is there something to what he's saying about like letting go and there's also like, not finding racism in everything, because sometimes in the workplace we may think that was racist, or no, I'm gonna file a racist claim. I feel racially profiled, whatever it is. Like, is there something there? Because I was trying to look at it in a deeper sense. I know we want to be mad just off the surface, but is there something there, or am I just overthinking? No.
Now you know I'm always tell you why.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's use your example of domestic violence. The word past is the key word. On the surface of what he's saying, of course it is correct. When you carry dead weight from the past, you're not allowing yourself to heal, and you're always in a state of trauma. That is correct. Are you applying that logic to the right scenario? The issue of past is what we're talking about. Domestic violence issues, just Lord, it's different because there's so many dynamic things in American racism and discrimination. Even if you want to take it step from racism, right? Because you have bias, then you have discrimination, then you have oppression, then you have prejudice, then you have racism. There's literally a tier. And the way it moves up the tier is the level of power and consequence that the person who's holding that bias or oppression or discrimination can afflict on the minority. That's how it gets to racism. That's why Black people cannot be racist because they can be prejudiced as fuck, because their bias or prejudice towards you, they cannot then turn that around on a systematic scale and harm you with it. They can't deny you jobs because they don't like the name Sarah. So domestic violence, you said, if you had someone abuse you and you've been holding on to it, right? So I'm assuming in that situation, you are no longer being abused. You were abused, even if it was for a long time. Let's say 200 years, right? You were abused.
Arbitrary number.
Yeah, you were abused, but you're not anymore. You've been non-abused for 100 years, maybe 50. Who knows? And so, one, I think, even if it was on that point, the math not mathing. You want someone to get over abuse of 200 years in 100 years does not make sense. At the very least, you need to give that person the same amount of time that the abuse occurred. We're not even talking about how it compounded, and it's not just a singular abuse. You literally abuse their psyche, their spirit, their soul. You were expecting this person to be Wonder Woman after you're not even acknowledging that they survived, the brilliance of their survival to even be talking about in a healing space, right? But that's even if that was even partly the case. You cannot heal and move on from something that's still happening. It's disrespectful to me. And I don't care if it was a Black American saying it, because them niggas say it too. You need to move on and let it go. As if Black people hadn't moved on and tried to move on and let it go, which is why you have the Black Wall Street, which is why you have Rosewood. Black people have built their own towns. They have circled their own dollar. Every little what people think is new and revolutionary, like, you're not that smart. This is telling me you don't read, because Black people have always they've already done that stuff. Been very community minded, been very lenient towards them to make sure the community is strong, build schools, build everything, have our own economies. And it was not only taken, it was violently taken from them every single time. There's not a time in history, right? Now that's just that. And now we're talking about institutional racism that we not only see blind as day, right? Like, say, the police organization, right? Which we know history started as a slave patrol to re-slave, which is why you have mass incarceration, because they were arresting people for vagrancy because they didn't have homes and jobs anymore, and putting them into jail and giving them outrageous systems. My problem is people don't recognize cause and effect, how things have worked, which is why maybe they can't see that that it hasn't stopped. I'm trying to figure out, where's the point that it stopped? Where's the point when it stopped, when you have studies that are done by Pew Research and the most esteemed think tanks that still show Black people getting pulled over and arrested for silly traffic offenses, Black people getting 10 times the sentence of the same crime as anybody else. Black people get arrested more just because they're over policed, right? Black people getting denied jobs when we want to shift to economics, that they've been working they behind. If they done got the degree, they done got through all the microaggressions, they done got through the blatant racism, and they done graduated Stanford, and they still can't get a job because my mama named her Shaniqua. What part of not even just as us as that lead, you know, I hate when people say this, I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams, bullshit, right? Like, but the fact that we've gone to school and
I have
nobody
the
beat
shirt
us.
on. What are you talking about?
Nobody beat us, right? Like our college experience, you know, we could go to school and we might have got some looks, but we were relatively safe. Okay, so why aren't you acknowledging that? We move on every day. We're doing what you're saying doing. We cannot let it go because it's still happening. Black people would love not to ever say nothing about slavery again. We would love it. We would love it, Maxine, if we could just go get a job and we could be sure, you know, that even if it was, oh, they just didn't like us petty as a person. It's because we're Black. It can't even be for like the petty stuff. Like, you know what? I ain't vibe with her. I vibe with the other one. Because people lose jobs like that too. It doesn't matter what race, right? It's because you're Black. Because your name, it's not even subjective anymore. You have studies, you have data that proves it. What else do Black people need to do? What else is the white people that's trying to show people that, hey, they're not just making this shit up? You know, like, they would love to. It's disrespectful to people for people en masse, Black people in every community. Yes, there are some people who they are hopeless, right? Let's talk about Black men, but in particular, who at least on a economic front, Black women are challenged because they end up having to care for everyone because the Black man's not in the home, and also because there are a lot of first gen, so they don't get to create the generational wealth, even though they got 12 degrees. Black men, 9 times out of 10, what is it? 2 out of 10 in their 30s are in prison or in some type of, or have been in juvenile. That shit's on your record. It automatic for the rest of your life. For the rest of your life, if it's not keeping your right to vote, if you can't get in certain jobs, so you're capped. I don't respect statements like that because if you really break down in the system that we say, okay, Black people, we're gonna move on. Let's break down in the systems that really kind of govern us as a society. We have economic, we have social community, we have religion, we have education. Those are pretty much kind of like the main 4 tiers people move through. And let's look at all the things that we know currently, not in the past, Maxine. We're not bringing up lynching, even though we're not bringing up none of the past. We're talking about right now, right? Let's look at in economics, like, okay, so what is stopping Black people? Is it Black people saying there's racism that's stopping Black people from applying for these jobs or getting their jobs? Or do you have proof that there's institutional barriers that are directly related to their race or how someone perceives their race based on some type of attribution, their name or how they dress or whatever, right? Let's look at school the same way. Let's look at, so when you don't really pay attention, it's not even like you got to really be a real scholar to see those out and about. You just had to acknowledge them. Saying something blanket like, oh, they need to let it go, as if they want to be oppressed, as if we want to be the only race that's never gotten our reparations, and to say that we should leave a country that we built to be oppressed in Africa. Because let's be very clear. I don't know why Akon want to play like
Africans weren't slave owners.
And they want Black people. We're not even truly Black to a lot of them. Let's be very clear, right? Black people will be oppressed wherever they go. And so I'll be damned if we leave a place that we actually built, that we actually do have some history, that we actually can say, you know, we did this and we have the proof to back it up, versus us, what we supposed to ship up. Black people are the only people told to fix their abuse that they didn't abuse themselves of, and to make something new. Oh, I know you broke your Black and your families were split up, but hey, just build something new. Just build it new. You haven't been healed yet. You haven't even gotten the resources to be healed yet. We're still not even going to let you get the jobs that you need, that will probably give you the resources to help you heal yet.
But get over it.
But get over it. Let it go. Let it go. And Akon's not the only one. Celebrities, especially ones, because I'm sure Akon came from poverty. I don't know. I'm assuming, right? If he did, when they get that snapshot of success, it does trick your mind to think that, oh, well, damn, maybe it wasn't as hard as we thought. But you're not looking at, you're succeeding in one of the only industries, one you don't even own.
Like, does he even have his
ownership? You don't even have ownership as a whole, Black people dominate sports and they dominate music and don't own a goddamn thing. And so you still don't have power. You got people buying out Michael Jackson, trying to keep it from some random white person to get it because he had to sell his masters because he couldn't afford it. Like, you don't even own the industry that you made the most money in, but you have the nerve to tell someone else with less resources, less power, and not the talent to succeed in the only kind of sphere that we've been allowed to really see that success. That's why when they point out exceptional Black people, it's always stars, because you can't deny that it's overwhelmingly Black. But let's talk about the leadership in healthcare, in schools. You might have a lot of Black teachers, but it's the least respected, even though it's the most work, least respected profession and the least paid profession. So they're still muling. How you gonna teach someone's child to overcome something you can barely afford your rent? It makes no sense. It's nonsensical. So it's not a true argument. I would be willing to talk about, hey, let's separate out those people. Let's really talk about or try to identify the places where there are instances where we might be a little trigger happy on trying to assert prejudice or racism, because we don't, 8 times out of 10 is true. And so we don't even give the 2 times that it could not be true any type of consideration, because that's what happens, right? You see something, which is a human thing. When you go through a certain experience and it's the same thing every time, are you gonna be more likely to, when another experience that happens in the same way, are you gonna be more likely to say, you know what, it's exactly what happened last time? Or maybe it's something new. That it's not how human brains work. Our brains don't work to say, you know what, I've been through this situation 5 times and it's almost exactly like this, but I'm just going to hold some space and we're going to do some cross analysis because it might on an off chance be something else. No, your mind builds schemas. How you react to certain things, especially trauma, is because that's how you either learn to cope, and you're triggered. Nobody wants to talk about the thing that triggered you because you had to have been triggered. Sometimes it might be an off trigger, but because it's something similar, right? And that's what's really happening. Like in corporate America, I don't think I've ever been racially profiled, but there's some hella passive aggressiveness, and there's some ways that people talk to me that makes me feel like they don't really like Black people. I don't call it that, and I refuse to let that be in my mind, because I don't want to wait, but I will wait. But I know what I know. I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm still going to work every day.
And and that's real, right? But it feels like you're being gaslit, because it's like, that was a racial microaggression, right? You keep on talking about my hair and it's changing. Why are you so worried about my hair? Yes, Black women hair, sometimes it may be short, sometimes it may be long, sometimes it may be braided one day, and the next 2 days it's let go and curly until your back. Why is that such an issue? When we look at that, it triggers something, and it makes us feel like it cringes something inside of us, but we can't. It's hard because how do you name that? Like, what? I go to my human resource officer and be like, yeah, so and so keep on talking about my hair and I was racist. Like, yes, that's it too, but it's like, it feels like that's in your head. You're just taking it that way.
And the thing is, you don't, like you said with the HR, you don't have there's no committee, especially for Black women. There's no outside justice department or officer that you can really go to that's gonna help you navigate it, so that you don't have to hold this in, right? There is no way to really say it's a microaggression, right? But so what do you have to do? You got to hold that in, and you got to fight yourself on the pain that you feel. It's a physiological pain and a paranoia that stirs, right? Because you're being watched. And it's not even say the hair. It could be like when you voice an opinion. There's a certain way you have to be when you want to calm the letter to corporate world, and there's a certain way you got to be when you have responsibility, and when you're right, when you're defending yourself. You're a human being like everybody else. Everybody else gets to do that, but you got special rules. You got to be calm. You got to be. You're fighting against human nature. That's the reason why everybody else does the same thing, not because they're all white because they're human beings. We respond things. That's why they say we're more like was it
Interpersonal?
interracially, we're more alike than even if we are intraracially, because it's about humanality. That's why you have the same human evils in freaking Guatemala that you got right here in a third world country. You know why? Because it's human behavior. Has nothing to do necessarily with like direct racism. But we can't act human because we get punished. So when there's a punishment that you get, either some type of physiological pain that you got sent with, and the punishment is not being able to talk about it. The punishment is not being able to really stand up for yourself and say, or create a space for yourself, or not to deal with it at all. That's the punishment in that type of situation. But then for the more avert situations, there's nothing you can do but try again. Black people do that every day. And so, yeah, I reject that. And when we talk about problems, do we focus on the small percentage that does the problem? We focus on the majority. I want to keep that same energy on how we really address problems, right? Because there's always the subset of the sample size of people that is probably they see racism probably in every single thing. They don't even want to look at nothing else. And it's probably not racism. It might not even be prejudice. It might be just a little bit biased, but we all have biases, right?
Yes.
Like that's something we all deal with, right? So of course. But people make those type of statements to try to play gotcha. Because what they try to do is say, oh, see, you said one person. You said two people. The majority of Black Americans throughout our history and present day are not doing that. When they're 9 times out of 10, when they're calling it, or they're not doing it purposefully, right? That's not their motive. If they're calling out something that they see as racist and it might just be discriminatory, they just didn't know it was discriminatory. They just looked at it as racist because the shit felt racist because they probably had a history of it, right? They haven't really sat down. Only reason I even really know the tears is because it's part of my degree, it's part of my master's program. So I think in a systems minded way. So I think in the cause and effect. I think in what's interrelated. How do we really turn the outcomes? I've done research. I look at that type of stuff. Not everybody does, and I didn't before 2014, right? So you can't play gotcha on the people that do. If he had said the people that do it, if he had phrased it that way, then yes, it would have been automatically correct because there are people that do it. I might even do it once out of the 90 times I do it. It's not you can't really monitor that. But he's making the phrase, he's making the allegation that as a whole, present day, Black people are just out here moping around, and we not fighting for we're not trying to move on. We're not trying to heal ourselves. We're trying to get it from the government. Black people get the least from the government, the least.
But the least, and then we get painted as lazy fucks because we're on welfare, or we're getting some type of assistance from the government when we don't really get that much. Or
we don't. White people do. White women specifically. The numbers are right there, Maxine. It's free.
People don't do their research. People
They're
just go off of buzzwords. Yeah,
it's disingenuous. Because he just could have done it. He didn't have to do it. You got money. Have your person say, look at these numbers real quick. Look at these numbers real quick. Let me really say, like, is it really Black people? Because then I would have been, if you had to come to me and say, you know what, 2007, because research tends to be like a little like 2 to 3 years behind because of the cycles they do it. So like probably the most recent census data and the most recent all those type of all the government data things that they do probably it's 2017, right? He could be like, as of 2017, out of the sample size, because it still was just a one sample size, it wasn't all Black people in America, but out of that pretty significant sample size, 64% of you niggas is calling out racism that ain't racist. Here's the number. Hey, shit, 64? Where is that? Let me see. I would have been, you would have got me. Because now you're teaching me something. Because I obviously didn't know that, but that's not what you did. Because if you Google it right now, that's not what the numbers say. That's not what it says. Black people are the most educated group out of everybody. Out of everybody. And have the most against them. And you're going to sit here and say that they're not trying to move forward? No.
Agreed.
I can kick a rock.
Yeah, look. there's this disconnect clearly, and he's not getting it. I think there's also this you know how
He's selling
oftentimes
Africa to China, ain't he? I heard that he's
yeah,
selling out
yeah,
Africa.
another
Let me tell
imperialist.
you.
Look at
So you
talking
sell
about slave
you
master.
you selling out your country to
Yeah,
China,
yeah,
talking about in the guise of you're trying to get sustainable electricity. No,
yeah, yeah.
no, you ain't got to sell nothing to get no sustainable electricity.
And you know what's
You
so
can build
funny?
partnerships. You can build
That
partnerships.
Right. But you know what's so funny about that is, you know, when you first hear that, it's like, wow, he's putting light in dark areas. He's really helping out the impoverished. And and then if you do your research, right? If you look into it deeper, you realize, hold on, wait, what does this entail? Are
What's the deal?
people being kicked out of their homes? Are people losing property? Or, you know, you don't realize that until you really ask those questions, have these critical conversations. So you know, that's it's all funny, it's all sketchy. I think there's a disconnect when it comes to many people, not everyone of course, but many people who are not from the states, and many people who are rich, who are at a certain tax bracket. They don't see things anymore. Suddenly they forget where they came from, or their history, or how they were brought up at all.
I hate that. I'm gonna just say this one thing, because I don't know what it's like to be a Jew. I don't know if I even know that many Jewish people. I have no idea what it's like to be Assyrian. I have no idea what it's like to be Iranian. But it is not, I don't have to do a bunch of research to have empathy and to know when to close my goddamn mouth, because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I don't have to do all it. So then why do people have to have read 12 books for, we need to call them out. You don't have to read and be up to the latest research for you to simply know as a common sense. Because if you speaking like you smart, I'm a critique you like you're supposed to be smart. If you speaking
And you
like
know
you,
what? I'm so glad you brought that up, because I forgot to make that point about the Jewish community. You know, you don't speak negative about the Jewish community. You don't say shit about the Holocaust. If you want to talk about it, talk about the history of it and its facts. You don't come out and be a Holocaust denier, right? And it wasn't too long ago, Nick Cannon got his ass dragged for the anti-Semitic things that he said. So it's funny because we have this reverence for the Jewish history, the community, and we never fix our mouths to say just get over it, right? Because they're not living in a consistent state of discrimination, of
ain't no gas chambers. There's no more.
Right. There's no more of that, and there's no redlining anymore. Like there's none of that for them. There's nothing.
And their survivors are revered.
Yeah.
There are survivors right now in your family. Ain't nobody revering them. There's black men that fought in all these world wars that didn't get any of the GI Bills, and they had to sit there. And you know what they had to do? They had to move on from it. They didn't get none of that. While they watched the white middle class families, they build houses off of FHA loans that was supposed to go to those veterans. They were denied it, right? And you have the nerve to fix your mouth. Their survivors, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You would, like you said, they would never do that, Maxine. You have somebody with a number on their arm. Bitch, you stopping everything. You paying for lunch, dinner. I ain't never seen that happen.
You're having them speak at schools. Yep. I will have them come into my class and speak to my students.
Making sure they get top dollar. They're going to get something for their goddamn time, as they should, because I am not a oppression Olympics. But
absolutely,
there are places, because it did not happen in America. Even on the large scale. I'm not going to even sit here and play like Americans didn't discriminate against Jews. I'm 100% probably they did, right? During that time.
But
the atrocity
it mostly
happened. Did happen. That happened in Germany. You know what? Germany is paying for that shit. We happened in America. That's why some black people get so tense when people want to bring up other shit. Like, hey, that's cool, but this happened here.
Yeah.
And especially with immigrants who come over here and their parents have gotten success, and that has paved the way for them to build their smaller micro communities and still hold on to their language. They ain't got to talk English on a goddamn day in their life if they want to. They build their communities. It was very smart. But you know what they don't ever talk about? I always ask, well, if you went back to Russia, or if you went back to the place that deep part of Nigeria, would they have been as successful? No. If you take the hard work that you said is why they were successful, because they worked super hard. and they save their money because Black people will just be spending shit for no reason, right? And they do all this, and they did all the right things. They did nothing the wrong things. They never bought a drink or nothing, and they held up their community, and that's how they succeeded. I said, okay, you take all of that. I want you to take exactly what they did here. Can they do it back in the homeland that they escaped from and be as successful? Because it shouldn't, if it's just about you, Maxine, and it's not about the external environment, you should be able to replicate that shit. It's never a yes. You want to know why? Because they escaped from oppression that they were feeling and under in their home country. So much so, they had to leave the land of their goddamn ancestors to come to a foreign land to build a life for themselves. Isn't that
from
the
scratch?
slogan? Yeah. Isn't that the slogan? We come to America to get a better life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my parents did.
You couldn't have a better life when you were. So then, why does that logic apply here? We're in the place of our oppression. We ain't got nowhere to escape to start over. I never get that. It makes so much sense to me. All you got to do, if that was, I'm pretty sure your parents were hard workers, Maxine, in Haiti. I'm sure they were hard workers. I'm sure they made smart decisions, or majority of them. I'm sure they were everything that makes a successful person in Haiti. They didn't just become that person in America. What happened was there were environment changed. There were laws that they weren't subjected to. There was daily interaction that they were subjected to that allowed them to thrive. And that needs to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
That can tell you the whole story right there.
That's enough right there. But I feel like at the end of the day, it still feels like a lot of people don't give a fuck about Black trauma. A lot of people don't care about our traumatic history, our traumatic past, and, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We've been hearing that. I just think off the top of my head when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that in his, he didn't say that, but he was explaining why that doesn't make sense for Black people. You can't pull up bootstraps
when you ain't got no boots.
I don't have boots.
So he said, how you gonna tell them to pull up that bootstraps? Yeah, ain't got no boots, baby.
Right. So make that make sense.
They don't never say that part of the speech though. They cut it right off.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna cut off right here.
Period. Bill never said the part where he got real. He said, well, how you going up? That ain't part of the speech.
Right. Because that'll be too radical.
For me.
That'd be too radical.
For me to have just now figured that out. I was like, damn, that's part of the speech. I could have sworn he said it.
And it shouldn't be embarrassing for anyone because that's not, we wasn't taught that, right? Like, it's not our fault. So speaking of slavery shit, Selah, so Selah is just Selah. Huh?
I said, because listen, it really is the undercurrent of everything. It really is. It's not.
Look, it's the base, right? We got to build from that, right? So Selah Hill, who is a daughter of Lauryn Hill and Rohan Marley. So Selah Marley, that's her last name, Marley.
She's the one with the green. Oh no, I'm thinking of Erykah Badu's daughter. Never mind.
Right. So she recently shared on Instagram that her mom was on some slavery shit, quote unquote. And here's a direct quote from her. My mom is an amazing woman, but she obviously didn't do everything right. She was just very angry. So angry, Selah said. She was literally not easy to talk to. And then half the time we didn't live with her. I live with my grandparents half the time. It's crazy. I'm playing back this trauma back in my head as I speak to you. And there's another quote. Oh, this part. And then the threats, the constant threats, that belt, man, that's that slave shit. Selah continued, that was some slavery shit. All Black parents were on that shit. You want to embarrass me? That's what Lauryn Hill would say to her. You want me to embarrass you? You want me to give you something to cry about? I'm not mad at a little discipline, but what can a 5-year-old do? What can a 7-year-old do? So as she's saying this, she's admitting that she's hurting. This is still affecting her to this day. I'm not sure how old she is, but I'm assuming she's probably in her 20s at this point. And, there is this, and actually towards the end of this article, she admits that even though she hasn't been professionally diagnosed, she believes that she has some sort of split personality to some degree. She says, but just a form of a split because it's like a part of me stopped growing at the age that my dad left. Whenever that stopped, I feel like something just stopped or maybe it never grew, it never developed, like something, she was like in some form of arrested development. And what's interesting about that part is when her father left, I don't know what part, where is she placing her siblings, because Lauryn Hill actually had 5 kids with Rohan Marley, who is the father that she's speaking of, who abandoned her. So I'm interested to know what exactly did that look like. But either way, I think the point is, you know, I was talking about in a previous
Did she
episode.
say anything about outside of him leaving? Does she go into any detail about that trauma and how that affected her or her mother, him leaving?
No, she didn't go deeper into that. That was the only direct quote I see here from that part. But I was talking about it in a previous episode, and I was saying how, you know, we don't realize enough how much your childhood lingers into your adulthood. We don't realize the things that were said to you when you were younger, from your parents, from your mother, from your father. And I was sharing how when I was younger, I experienced a traumatic moment with my mother, and it really just damaged our relationship then, and it did for a few years post that moment. And just now I'm getting into a nice, strong relationship with my mom. And I see that manifesting into how I interact with certain relationships, like with my romantic relationship, even some platonic relationships. I sometimes don't allow myself to move forward from a certain point, because if I get too vulnerable, or even if I get vulnerable, I fear that I will be abandoned emotionally the way I was with my mom many, many years ago. So I think to myself, like, damn, why does that still, like, I was 13, I was 12, I was in my high school years, but I'm 29 now. I should be able to like move on and live. But and when I was looking at this quote from Selah, I think about like, damn, this is some scary shit. Like you get older, but those experiences from your childhood stay with you, and you have to do a lot of unlearning, and you have to recognize and name the fact that that was abuse. Well, I don't know what happened in her home. From what she was saying, that was some slavery shit. You have to recognize and admit it to yourself. I went through some abusive stuff. I suffered from it, and now this is how it manifests in my own life today. Now, how do I navigate that into having a successful friendship, a successful relationship? How do I have a successful relationship with myself? How do I love myself and see myself beautiful, even though for so long I wasn't considered that? You know, so I'm just wondering, because when we think about Black parenting, you know, a lot of Black households that I know of, whether it's a Caribbean household or just a Black American household, a lot of us have been through the same or similar types of disciplinary situations. Like, you know, the belt was a common thing. Like no one really
extension cord,
the switch, right? You know, so that's nothing new. But when a white person or your white coworker happen to hear that conversation, they see it like, wait, what? Like they're thrown off. They see it as abusive. That's inappropriate. We talk to our kids. We give them timeout, right? Like, where's the line there? Because of course, you know, you have to discipline your children, but where is the line when it's not abusive, right? like I was just trying to unravel that, and I just don't know what the answer is to that.
And to be honest, you don't feel bad about it, because you have entire subsections of scholar, academia, that this is all they try to study, and they can't tell you where the line is, because with human development is very tricky. Here's the thing. When I was doing psychotherapy in that fellowship that I talked about, I was working with veterans who dealt with chronic pain, mental illnesses. Most of them were PTSD and comorbid, meaning they had some type of mental illness, usually depression, anxiety, or PTSD, and they had some type of physical illness, usually some type of chronic pain, or an addiction diagnosis, usually alcoholism. And so during doing the psychotherapy, I noticed that the way I address it, at least my skill set, is you have to find the root cause. Because if you can't really understand the problem and how it branched out and where the branches are, because there's a lot of things that affect areas in our life we don't even see the connection to. We only see the end of the branch. We don't see the beginning of the branch, right? And that's important, one, because you have to be aware and you truly have to know what the problem is to be able to formulate a strategy. Part of that strategy is recognizing that our expectation for healing and how we frame what that's supposed to look like, depending on what type of trauma it is not going to be, it's not like a broken bone and it's 100% recovered. That's we think of recovery in a very medical model sense. You heal, you break a bone, you patch it up, it's fixed. Your teeth are messed up, you get a new tooth. It's a swap out. With mental and trauma, because it impacts personality, because it impacts development, it is not, you can't take a piece of your personality out. You can't even shut that piece down, because if you could, then everybody would do it. When you think about like, oh man, this happened when I was 13, why is it still affecting me? Because I look at it as cause and effect. You can't reverse time, right? You can't take away an effect when the cause is still there, right? And that's not saying, right, we're not even at the part of like, well, what do? We have to get our minds to understand what type of complexity we really are talking about here. We're not just talking about a moment in time, even though that's what we flash back to. We're flashing back to that moment in time, or the moments in time that happened, and then we say, well, all this time has passed. Our perception of how that works it doesn't work that way. It is cumulative. It is built upon. And so what you can do is where people are at now, right, is developing coping mechanisms that are pretty much kind of like ibuprofen. It lessens the symptoms and it allows you to think about your reaction and how you want to proceed when there's a trigger to your trauma, right? So for example, if you're having my mom, me and my brother, my sister have the same father, and she didn't tell them, but he was abusive. She has a tooth that still broke to this day that he hit her with when she was in the car. She was trying to leave, right? And she pretty much was single my entire life. I've pretty much been single since I've probably had like one official boyfriend. Now I've talked to people. I've had talking stages, but as far as like real deal, super involved relationships, that's very much so because one, I know how to live without a man. So on a positive side, I never had even the inkling of like living under a man or needing that man for emotional support or financial support, right? I was raised to never that men were evil, but you cannot depend on them. But at the same time, it was such an extreme that it's very hard to be vulnerable enough, even if I can still support myself and I'm not even dependent on that person for support. The fact that I even can even ask him for anything or even have that expectation of him is too much, right? So especially when physical trauma, I do believe, especially with the belt, that is how we were always raised, because it's really kind of like not that hard. I know we don't want everything to go back to therapy, but we kind of need to check ourselves about that, because why do we need to be ashamed that if everything traces back to a certain horrific point? We're not talking about some lily time that people were just put in time out. People were chattel slavery. They were grotesquely hurt. Of course, that's how they know how to give out that frustration. One part of it is, and I remember reading something back ago, I don't want to speak too broadly about it, but part of it was they corrected their children before the master had time to correct them. Right?
Interesting. I didn't know that. Wow.
Because you're going to get hurt by me, but he's going to kill you. And when you don't have time to talk, because that's really how it needs to happen. When we're talking about when you look at progressive leaders that work in child development, and even in adulthood, they always include a child development session. You're always going to talk about your childhood because it always matters. It's never going to not matter. When you talk about development, Max, think about math. You couldn't learn calculus until you learned algebra. Like you can't skip, but you also can't go back. It's a building block. If you take that, you can't just take it away, right? So, and it doesn't necessarily lessen depending on the trauma. But when you're talking about anything with like a physical, because your body is, especially your brain is there to protect you, it probably sectioned off the way that you dealt with the trauma at the time, especially as children, because they don't know a lot of ways, was not, you couldn't deal with it because it was too much for you. So a lot of times your brain just put it in the back.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
it feels so heavy. Like, bro, this happened 12 years ago. You couldn't deal with it because your brain wasn't even capable. It didn't even have the structures yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh
So
my
what
gosh.
is it? So what does it do to that? And this is not me like being deep. This is actual like neuro psychology. Like, what your brain is made to protect you. That's why people like, that's literally what it is. But your brain, right, the going rate, because it changes all the time, is 27 is when a brain is like an adult. So you're talking about a lot of things, especially when a child, your brain doesn't have the neural the pathways to be able to handle it. It just has to react in the moment because the pain is still there. That's when she's talking about things that shut down. Like a lot of girls, especially like if they dealt with, let's take the, where I've heard of, it's not split personality, I don't believe, because the DSM definition is different. But arrested development, where you're outside of yourself almost, and that little child is always there. She shuts down to protect herself, and this outward person, the one that the thing is happening to, is literally almost kind of like a guardian. So the internal, so that you see that a lot with kids that were molested.
Yeah.
They are almost like in a trance. They have to go outside of themselves to be able to deal with the situation, not even conceptually, because they don't even have the words for it, the language. They shut down their inner selves, and the outer selves that the thing is happening to is not happening to them. But what happens is your body grows. It doesn't matter what happened to you. It's going to grow. You're going to look like an adult, but you're still in that stuck place that you shut down with to deal with the pain. That's what the brain does, right? So when you're at a place where you're now able, either because you have more education and you know how to name things, right? That's why she's like, oh, darn, sitting back thinking about it, I know how to name these things now, right? Or your brain can finally have space and to let that trauma out. Now you're like, okay, why does it feel so fresh? It happened long ago, because you couldn't deal with it then, even though you think because you moved on time with it was dealt with. But if you think about it as a child, how could you have dealt with it? What's the thing that your black mama tell you, go sleep?
Yeah, yeah. And I was remembering
they really thought that was gonna refresh you, right? No, it did not. Your
like
body,
I wake up with the same memory.
Your body, but hold on, but your body.
Yeah.
Because sleep is how we repair ourselves. A lot of times mentally, but with that type of space, the trauma is not gonna happen like the nap. Because a lot of times we're talking about it as a kid, especially if you had a parent who had a very low tolerance and patience, or you did a lot of childish things that were very annoying. So either way, you were getting beat multiple times or a lot of times a week. How can you heal from something when it still happens? It's the same logic. You can't. You learn to survive it.
Yeah. And like you create these escape routes. Like you go through these escapisms. Like I remember when I was young, and I still love reading, but I used to read constantly. Like I would just
be in another world.
Yeah, I would lose myself in these characters, and I would create. And I'm remembering this, like it was just a few weeks ago. I was having breakfast with a friend. And I was remembering I used to love reading so much. Like every single weekend, I had a new book. I would beg my dad to bring me to Barnes and Nobles and pick out another young adult novel book. And I used to love drawing a lot. And I would just be in my room drawing so much. And I look back at it in my 29-year-old perspective in my mind. I'm realizing I was doing those things because I didn't want to be physical. I didn't want to mentally be where I physically was. Like I didn't want to be at home anymore. I didn't want to remember. I didn't have any power. And my only power was these figures I was drawing, these characters I was learning about, and sleeping and whatever. Like I released that. Yet when I got out of that escape route, I remembered, oh yeah, here I am back home. Here I gotta listen to my mom. I got,
No, I personally, one thing that that was a great coping mechanism for me. I wasn't necessarily physically abused, but I had a lot of abandonment issues. My mom went through a lot of trauma herself, and that's part of it. We have to acknowledge how people who are dealing with trauma do not even have the capability. It's not absolving them from a damn thing. Yeah. But in order to get the answers that we need, we have to take the facts as they are. When people, what was she angry about? She wasn't angry at you. You were 5, right? She was angry about something, and she did not, or she could not do the work that she needed to do to figure out how to address it when it came to you. And she should have. Everybody should always strive for it, especially when you're a parent. It's not fair. We are asking a lot. You're asking a lot for a severely traumatized person to fight through that trauma. It's the same thing, but there is something when it's a child. Sometimes it's what you got to do, or you got to do it the most you can, right? And sometimes people don't just do it at all, but sometimes people try and they can't, right? And so,
or if they don't, if they do it, they may not do it in productive ways, right? They may speak to alcohol, drugs.
They think they are, because they know what the worst is. When we talk about the lesser of two evils, there's a reason why the dichotomy is such a popular thing, because there is such a thing. There is such a thing as a lesser of two evils. And Black people as a people, most of us have always been in, and as part of it's called epigenetics. It's how things that happen in past generations are literally built in your DNA. It's not just a Black thing, it's a human race thing. That's how you get the caveman to us, right? How they hunted and gathered for food, how they determined who survived and who lived, right? How their adaptations was genetically coded, right? And the environment that they're in, because just because something is genetic code doesn't mean it's always activated. They have studies of this where they have twin adoptees. It's a famous twin studies, and they try to determine alcoholism, because it's a very pervasive disease that's very hard to cure. 2 twins, they went to 2 different families. They come from the same lineage of generational alcoholics, and they want to see, is it the nature? That's how they use to prove, is it nature versus nurture. Nature says that they're both going to be alcoholics. It's in their genetics, but maybe it's nurture. And what happened was, what it proved was, it's both. One, by nature, if you're looking like a spectrum, that everybody's on a spectrum for everything. You're capable of anything. But some people, by their genetics, if this is like the D-Day, they right here. You all the way back here. You got to really go through some things to be an alcoholic, right? You can drink your whole 20 years and still not be. But somebody whose family has been drinking themselves and become an alcoholic, because alcoholism is different than just drinking. Your brain literally changes. There's synapses that don't rebuild. Like, there's a brain thing that happens. If you're right here, that means you could have 2 drinks, Maxine, you're alcoholic. That's what epigenetics means. And the twin that was in the environment that was loving and didn't have any alcohol around, they didn't become an alcoholic, but they were still very at high risk, versus the twin that they were in a very alcohol-centric, and guess what? They became alcoholics, but they didn't drink excessively all the time. They just drink a little bit. That's how they figured out it was a spectrum. So it's the same thing when you're thinking about certain traumas that Black people have endured generationally. We're always in this state of survival. A lot of us, especially our generation, we're trying to get to where we thrive, right? We want to get to where we thrive. We want to get to the houses. We want to get to the generational wealth, because we are in a state of constant survival. That is epigenetically. And that's another reason why that's another evidence that racism and institutionalized racism, right? The racism, it keeps you down structurally, to where you can't ignore people's personal vendettas, because it harms you structurally, because it creates the environment that's triggering your survival mode. You're surviving because you don't have jobs. You're surviving because you're over police. You're always in a state of activated fight or flight. You don't have no other room. Your brain cannot allow the other parts of the brain that might have reason, right? That might have that control reason, that houses more long-term memory, and that's where you have all of the steps and the coping mechanisms that you've read about. brains, when you're in flight or flight, you're in fight or fright. That's why when people are in a panic mode, it doesn't matter what situation, they have to bring you down. They have to. You cannot function. You can't do the next step unless you are at a calm state, because it tells your brain, okay, I'm not about to die. Now let's see what else we can do. Now let's see what other options we have. But when you're constantly in that state, right, especially mentally, because it's a prison, you can't outrun it. You literally can't take your brain out. You can't exchange it.
You're a
You
prisoner of
can't
your mind.
right, like we think when we don't even want to think.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's very hard to treat. That's why a lot of therapy is lifelong. There are some, but not all trauma is on the same spectrum, right? You do have some traumas where there's ways that either your life circumstances change, so that most of the time it's your life circumstances change, so you're no longer even close to the environment that you had. So it's not even necessarily that you were necessarily healed from it. You don't have any triggers. It feels like healing because you're not triggered anymore.
But what happens when, because that's an interesting point, but I wonder, like, okay, you're in a new house, new city, your family, you're in control of your family, your children are well, your husband respects you, and all this great life, but you may still have to have a close relationship with your family, with your parent who may have abused you, with your brother who may have abused you. And so I wonder, like, how do you navigate that? Do you
Most
cut it
people
off,
don't.
or do you, yeah. Okay.
If you talk about or even read about most people who really if they're at that point where we're talking like they're a constant trigger, they can't have a relationship with them, right? Like they literally have told you, I have had to cut this person out of my life. They've had to cut that person out of their life completely. And it's sad because it's when we're talking about just that person, a lot of times, especially family, they always try to squeeze that person back in your life, right? Because they didn't have the trauma, and it's never as deep to them because they didn't have to feel it. They don't know what it is to really carry. So a lot of times too, so it doesn't even just become that person, it becomes all of them. Because you can't trust any of them not to bring even if bringing up that person's name, you can't trust them. That's how people will go to it. If you're really talking about people who have that type of trauma, who have a trauma that's really affecting their growth, they are very active and aware of where they build their space to not let that thing come into their space anymore, to not let that thing trigger. It never goes away. There's never a real type of, there's never the type of full recovery to where it's like, I don't have to think about this thing anymore. I'm not saying they're going to think about it every day, but I'm saying if you really look at they will tell you they built systems in place that them to make sure they covered front, back, side to side. People if they have a husband, that husband knows every single detail. Like they make sure they have the type of support they need. Like these, if they can, right? We're talking about those who have moved outside of it and are not triggered. But then you have those who maybe their parents are the only one, say if they're disabled. Their parents have to take care of them. They can't escape it. So they do things like drugs, or it's a constant state of what other thing can I use to escape? There's always an escape there. You're either physically going to do it, you do it systematically where you're building up systems so that person can't touch you. You accumulate some wealth or some type of power that can legit stop that thing from entering your space, or you find a way to literally come outside of your mind. Most of the times it's drugs or hallucinogenics or alcohol. You have to alter it. There's nobody who's just living in that constant state of pain. They can't. Yeah. You can't. Your body's not built for it. I wish it was, because
I wish it was, because I wonder, you know how they say like cognitive, therapy, you got to speak life into yourself, right? Even spiritually, religiously, speak life over death, affirmations. And I feel like I don't want to discredit the good work that is that. But I feel like it could only do so much, right? You could only tell or convince yourself so much you are worthy of a desired love, right? And yet you're still compounded with moments when you wasn't in a position where that was worthy for you. So I feel like that there's like, okay, you can only be healed up until a point, and then you're just gonna have to cope through
Well, think
life.
about it like
I don't
this.
want to sound defeatist.
What people are doing when they're saying these things, when they're speaking life, what you're doing is you're building an armor. You're branding. That's why they say it's, especially what you speak, mostly because it's really connected to your brain, right? It helps you remember, just like what you write. That's why they tell people like to journal, because it's how you learn things. It's like cementing it in your memory. That's why they say repeat them every day. You're building up an armor or reserve. So what that's doing is when you get triggered, it shouldn't be as easily it shouldn't be easy to pierce and trigger you as much as it did before, because now you kind of have some type of, which is really just a coping mechanism, that's all it really is, of blocking the severity. But it's just mitigating the symptoms, like you said, right? You still are going to be aware. That's why you have to say it every day, right? Like, that's why you can't really be skipping no days. You have to say it. You got to say it to a point where your brain thinks it as a response to the trigger. That's what you're training it to do. You're saying, when this thing comes, where's my shield? What do I do? Your brain is going to recognize, like, oh, these type of words that hurt you, right? I'm hearing them. This is what we do to that. And it's supposed to, that's build armor, right? That's what it ends up being, truly, like in more. I have to try to like make things tangible, right? Because a lot of times we feel like, darn, if we don't really see it, if we can't feel it, it doesn't. I don't know how to understand it. But that's kind of what the point of it is. Like we're trying to build a different pathway of our brain to react to the trauma, but like you said, one, you have to keep doing it or it doesn't work anymore. And it is sad that you can never be fully healed, but that doesn't mean you have to be stuck in a state of hopeless survival either. There's a spectrum. I would say, coming from a part where you can't move on with your life to a part where you're fully functioning, and a part where you now have the tools to not have that trigger hurt you as much. I could not say my father's name. My father's never been in my life. He showed up one day when I was in high school. The only reason I knew he was my father is because he looked just like my brother. That same day, I remember my mama telling me, he said, I was so scared to even like look at him, talk to him. Everybody was dapping him up and shit. Like, the nigga ain't been missing. Like, I didn't have to go in foster homes because he wasn't there. Like, and I couldn't understand that. But I just rolled with it. And I remember my mama saying, he asked her, why was I so fat? Because I grew up heavy and my siblings didn't. None of even on his side, my siblings, they're just always naturally skinny. And I remember that, right? But I still didn't even really dislike him then. It wasn't until college, and my dad is, he lived in the Woodlands. He had like a mini yacht. He owned his own business. We want to talk about people who overcome. He went to jail for whatever he was jailed for, and he came out and made his own business. And I remember I was in college and I had like broken my ankle. I needed $200. He would not give it to me. I like needed it for surgery. I could not walk if I didn't have the surgery. And my mom didn't have it. He had to go to an aunt to get it from him, right? He didn't even come down. I had to hobble up to a cab to take myself to the hospital to get surgery and hobble back, right? Because he owns his own business. He didn't come see me, right? Like, I got to a point where that's what built up. I have never hated anybody in my life. My mother is not perfect at all. She did a lot of shit, but she was there, right? And she tried her best to fight through what she had to fight through. So I can respect that in a way where you can't respect someone who you see is not really doing what they're supposed to do, especially as a parent. That parent dynamic is very, you give them, at the same time you give them so much leeway, but then at the same time you can't. Right, there is a very conflicting.
It's hard
because your natural connection to them, but that usually only happens if you have a bonded connection. Like the parent that stays, they could have been a crap parent, but there is a bond there because you see the parts in the nuance. You see the times that they did try, and your brain, what we want to do with people we're bonded to, because that's how we survive is in communities. We want to grab hold to the positive parts, and so we curve some of that the badness that they did. But that only happens when the parent was there. When the parent was not there, it's very kind of cut and dry because it is like a stranger. You don't even have that bond. I got to the point saying I was screaming in phones at him outside of my student union. I had people come like, at least we can hear you inside the building. I couldn't control my anger. I couldn't even, no one could say his name. I would be enraged, right? I got on my knees. It hit me one day how much I hated him, and I did not like that. I got on my knees and I prayed to God. I can't even tell you if it was a month or a week. I just remember getting on my, because I was like, I need to pray right. So I got on my knees at the foot of my bed, like hands like this, like, God, take this out of my heart. Take this out of my heart, right? God has shown up to me in miracles before, but sometimes there were miracles I didn't necessarily pray because they were young. I was younger, so this was the first time I consciously was like, I got to answer immediately. And one day, I woke up and I remember a roommate had said something about my father. She asked some question because she was asking about my brother too. And I just answered it. And I realized I ain't feel no way. And to come from, can you still hear me? Mm-hmm. To come from fuming, I can't control rage, to I don't feel no way. And it was a short amount of time here. It had to be a month or less. Because knowing me, I wasn't getting on my knees praying consistently for that long, right? So I was like, God really, he really did that. Like, I'm telling you, like, my friends will tell you they couldn't say his name. To this day, I have no hate. I don't have no hate in my heart. That means I'm not sometimes bothered when someone says his name. Only when like I side eye when my brother then bring up stuff, but I don't feel that, right? So it's the same thing with, like, there's spectrums to things. You can't get to, it was a severe trauma. I couldn't, in that rage, not only was I like hurting myself with my friends, because who wants to be around that type of person, I would be secluding myself because I'm upset and I know how to deal with this pain, because the only way I can deal with it is if he becomes the person I need him to be and he's not. I can't make him do that. Right. So how then do I heal myself? Well, that was part of my compliment. I know to pray. I didn't really know if I expected it to work. I just know I was at a point I had to do something. And that worked. And it's almost kind of like not even necessarily a great example, because I really did go from 100 to 5. I didn't ask God for that. I just didn't want to feel that, hey, he could have put me on a 50. But that is a type of way where you slide off the scale. I chose a coping. It could have been all in my brain. For the people who don't believe, it could have been all in my brain. Whatever that did, it told my brain that I had a power. I didn't have it within myself, right? But God has that power, and God can put that power into me. God. So even if it's my brain tricked itself to get some imaginary power, it worked because it crushed out the thing that was hurting me. Doesn't matter where it comes from. Like, I don't care if you're a believer or you're not. Like, the whole point is you have to do something to combat the trauma. And that's usually what the therapy is. That's usually what, even on the bad part, right? That's usually what the drugs and alcohol do. They just do it for only a short amount of time. And it gives you a power that you did not have, because you think it has power. So you think you're siphoning it. You think that alcohol makes you stronger, or it makes you nonchalant to where you don't care anymore, right? Yeah. You think that's what you think that drug does. You think it makes you happy.
But as soon as it wears off. Okay, as we were. So I forgot what I was gonna say. But I think that's amazing. That's beautiful that you share that. We don't, I think oftentimes, it's scary to talk about these things, because especially amongst like friends who are like around our age, because it feels like you're the Debbie Downer, you're the miserable friend. And it sucks because I love these conversations, and sometimes I feel like I'm the intense friend. I'm usually the one talking about shit that happened to me, or like some spiritual stuff, or I'll talk about like, this this is why I hate being, I'll say like little things, just kind of fill out the room. Like, I don't like being vulnerable, right? And then no one knows.
You want to see if people even know those type of words. You want to see if people pick up on the words, like you say vulnerable. Like,
right. They're like, what?
You got to be in certain conversations for that to be like normal for you to hear. Yeah.
And then it's like, the response is just, okay, well, moving on. Anyway, you like your drink? Like, I just said I have intimacy issues. Like, I need help. I want to talk about it. Do you suffer from the same thing? So, I think it's powerful that you share that. And I think we need to have more of these comments, not just like on, like, I'm not just saying just on my platform. I'm just saying just period. Yeah. Like when you come over, when I hang out with you, and like just more of this, because it's needed. And I feel like it's a part of our healing. It's a part of our journey to be more whole and to be more of who we could have been had said trauma didn't happen. So
it's how we figure out how to answer that question. Where's the line between discipline and abuse? Because when you are aware of something, you're more likely not to do it. I used to do psychotherapy for school age kids. I'm very against bullying. I had some sessions with kids. It's like, I don't play about kids. Like they shouldn't experience no harm, period. Right. But I've had my niece doing the crap out of me. And I remember I yelled at her one time. I didn't like cuss at her, but I rose my voice and I had to like, whoa, immediately apologize. I tend to, like, when I'm super annoyed, I tend to just say that, hey, I'm annoyed right now, instead of, because she knows what that means, right? When my brother says things like, you acting crazy, or, like certain words that I check them on that. I check how my mom speaks to her, if it's harsher than because emotional abuse, verbal abuse, I check all that, right? Because when you're aware, it's like advertising. When you see behind the curtain, you see it everywhere. You can't unsee it. That's why people hate learning too. They're like, bro, I was happy in my ignorance.
Right. Ignorance is bliss sometimes. But I'd rather be aware, because I don't want to stay stuck in that environment when I know it's really hurting me. But yeah, this was a good conversation. This was great. Thank you, Alletia, again. As literally always, like you never fail. So this was good. And yeah, of course we'll do this again. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of God Built This Podcast with your host, Maxine. Be sure to leave a review, give me 5 stars, and of course, subscribe. Also, follow God Built This Podcast on Instagram at God Built This Pod. God bless.